she's ready to wrap up this watch deal. And since they're being so slow to, to get their acts together, she decides to go wait in a London hotel lounge to perform yet one more pitch to this company. Can you imagine just hanging around, like hoping somebody pops out of the elevator so you can rush them with your, hey, remember me? I still want to do your watches. Oh my gosh. Good morning, how are you? Welcome to another episode of Revenge Review. We're going through Tom Bower's book, and we're doing it as an answer to Spare. Now, in the last chapter that we read, we were talking all about Meghan's rising star. She wanted to become a member of the UN Women. She wanted to do this mostly because she was never very secure about her position on Suits, even though she was becoming more and more important to the storyline, and with each successive season, she was becoming more and more integral to the progression of the storyline. She just knew that as an actress, anything could dry up. Also, because she hadn't had a lot of other acting jobs during Suits, she was really aware that if and when Suits folded, she was going to be sort of out of work for a while, because only thing anybody knew her as was Rachel Zane. So in her desperation to find something else, and in her jealousy of other female stars who were making it in other political arenas, she decided that she was going to go after Emma Watson's position at the UN and see if she couldn't also replicate that. So she, through her connections with John Fitzpatrick and his connections to the Clintons and their connections at the UN, Meghan was able to secure a position with the UN Women. But Meghan did not prove herself in that arena. She didn't prove that she could talk about anything to do with women empowerment and women's rights. She didn't know enough about global politics to really be able to bring a fresh new voice to that position. But more importantly, she was difficult to work with. In the first video that they did with her, it was so unusable because she spent the entire time bossing everybody around, having issues with the script, having issues with the way she was being represented. And in today's chapter, we're going to come upon numerous episodes in which Meghan, the human being, is set aside to Meghan, the brand, and not by somebody else's standards, by her own standard. The thing she cares most about is pushing her brand. And she's become very, very, very much of an influencer in that conceptualization of herself. She doesn't seem to care so much about the fact that there are 1,000 other things that she could be doing with herself. It's, how can I continue to bring my brand, my style, my sensibilities to the masses? How can I get everybody to buy in on me? The problem is that she wasn't selling anything that was unique to her. And I think that that's one of the reasons she struggled so much to find traction, because she wasn't saying anything that was bold and strong and interesting. She wasn't showing anything that the typical lifestyle brand wasn't showing. Something else that's going to come out really clearly in this next chapter is her idea of herself, and her idea of how important she is colossally misrepresented. She strongly believes that she is super important, but everybody in her life is failing to see why she thinks that. Not that she's not important as a human being. I mean, of course, as a human being, she's important, but she believes that she should be wined and dined as though she were a top celebrity. And the thing is that would that we were all wined and dined like top celebrities. Wouldn't that be a perfect world? But the problem is there is a hierarchy in people's estimation of celebrity, and she just hadn't reached the heights that she wished she had. So in these, we're going to cover 2 chapters today, and both of them are so good. The first chapter is called Watershed, and that's in reference to a campaign that she ends up getting on that kind of solidified herself as though she wants to think she's very important. Agreeing to this specific campaign was the admittance that she was actually not all that important. And for somebody who would care desperately about being on brand, she was accepting jobs that were definitely off brand because she needed the money. And quite frankly, the money's not that good. Like, I read the price a couple of times. I thought, they only paid her that? Anyway, I mean, I guess maybe the royalties for it, came in handy. And then after Watershed, that first chapter, we're going to talk about her trip to Rwanda. It's unbelievable. because she didn't go with the UN. She's going to go with a different organization. And the people at that organization were absolutely blinded by having a minor celebrity in their midst. And the way that Meghan behaved was unbelievably self-centered on this trip. And so manipulative. And of course, she went in with a smiling face. She went in not being offensive in her personality, but her actions were certainly offensive to the poor little children in this village who she used for some fashion photography and a bunch of pictures that she could post all about how beautiful and awesome and what a philanthropist that she is. So sit back. If you can take some more of this ridiculous person, sit back. I have some stories to tell you. Thank you to all of the new subscribers. There's quite a number of you. And if you're enjoying this content, I think you'll also enjoy the book that we read before this, Spare. So you might want to go back and see some of those videos as well, because the book before this was ridiculous. And so it was pretty funny. And this one is ridiculous, but in a factual way. Like, I cannot believe the facts I'm reading, but it's probably less funny than Spare was, because Spare was almost, I mean, it was comedy hour every time we got together. Okay. Chapter 9, Watershed. Now, Meghan is working with so many agents and entertainment lawyers and PR companies that it's getting hard to keep track of who everybody is, who's trying to hustle right along with her. I mean, every time I'm like, what, you're employing another person? I mean, no wonder you're worried about money. Because, you know, she's still with Sunshine Sachs, and then she's got Gina Nelthorpe Crown in London, and then she's got this, now we've got this new person, Lori Sale, who's working hand in glove with her entertainment lawyer, Rick Janelle. And Lori Sale was known as a feisty, fast-talking, well-known agent, famous for securing marketing and branding contracts for her clients. And Meghan's entertainment lawyer had reached out to Lori Sales and said, hey, could you help Meghan? Remember, Meghan's big goal at this time was to become the face of something. Like, somebody give her a voice. Somebody give her, you know, somebody use her, you know, beautiful face. And so far, everything she had tried had come to naught. Remember when Gina Nelthorpe Crown had, you know, brought her to that place and there was 30 buyers of the Meghan brand, yet, well, potential buyers, but nobody took a bite except for one lesser known Swiss watch company who was really lukewarm on having a contract with her anyway. So now they're reaching out to Lori Sales. And Lori Sales says she does think she can get Meghan some kind of contract. So Sales went to Toronto, to Canada, and she had this idea. Now, I just want to say this before I even get into the story. I don't totally know why they hired Lori Sales. Not because she won't go on to do other things for Meghan, because she certainly does get her some other work. But for this particular thing, which becomes the greatest of Meghan's endorsements, I think Meghan had actually kind of already done all the legwork. I mean, I don't know really why Lori Sales would have gotten any credit for this. Because Lori Sales goes to Canada and she has a meeting with the head of marketing of Reitmans, which was a large women's clothing retailer. Now, Tom Bauer describes it as a 9-year-old business that offered inexpensive clothes throughout its 700 stores to an aging and declining clientele. So not very flattering. And Meghan, against all odds, I mean, I guess the only thing I can think is that she knew that the brand was so large and that the store was so big that if she could get her face with them, then she could, you know, secure some new followers on the TIG. Because I don't really understand why she would try to associate herself with this brand, which didn't necessarily seem like her thing. But Meghan had already, before Lori Sales got in on it, she already made overtures to Reitmans and had wanted to use some of those clothes on her website and with a mention to Reitmans. And so she'd already persuaded the store to let her promote their clothes on the TIG. So Sales was just pushing an open door, really, to negotiate this, because Meghan had already been in talks with them. They'd already had communication with Meghan. So I don't know where Lori Sales came in on this. I don't know if Meghan was like, hey, I think I have a little bit of a relationship over here with these people. Maybe you could secure me something more. I don't know. The book doesn't tell us. But anyway, Lori Sales does secure Meghan a contract with them. And it was a 2-year contract. And so for 9 days work of filming, this is what they pay her for this. And I just think that for Meghan, who thought she was so important, this would have been just chump change is what this would have been. But for 9 days work, filming the commercial, photo shoots, the launch, and TV promotion, Meghan would be paid $162,000, plus 7% royalties on the sales of all the products associated with her campaign. So it must have been the royalties, ultimately, that she was in on it for, because $162,000 isn't something I'd sneeze at, but for somebody who wants to be making millions and millions and millions of dollars, this isn't exactly an endorsement to run to. But she's willing to take it, because what else is she going to do? So Tom Bauer says, this was a watershed moment for Meghan. No serious Hollywood star, she knew, would associate herself with Reitman's, a brand whose clothes cost under $100, and for only $15,000 a day. After income tax and agent's commission, she'd be left with half that amount. She longed to be the face of Ralph Lauren, not Reitman's. That choice eluded her. At least no one outside Canada would get to see the campaigns. So she's just doing it for the money. And again, I mean, any normal person would be completely fine. I mean, I'll be paid $15,000 a day is nothing I'd sneeze at. And on top of that, even if it was halved, even if it was $7,500 a day, I'd still be like, cha-ching. But for Meghan, this would have been an embarrassment. This would have been something that she would have done and quietly tried to quell the panic that rose as she was taking jobs that she thought were beneath her. Well, maybe that's why she decided to act like such a diva on the day of filming, because a list of demands preceded her before she even got to the Montreal hotel where she'd be filming. She requested in her room and on location green juices, vegetables, and high-end bottled water. What they had for her was Fiji and Evian, but that wasn't good enough. No. I have specific specialty brands, and Evian and Fiji are not up to par. So, can you imagine? I'll drink water out of the tap. I mean, big deal. What in the world? But whatever they needed to do to keep their star happy, because Reitman's was on the decline and they needed some kind of, it doesn't even matter if it's a minor celebrity. We got to get some young blood up in here. So Meghan, they were willing to do what Meghan said. And after that, once they actually were doing the filming, it was going along just fine. Meghan was okay. But then things ended on a sour note, because when it was time to go to the airport, somebody had not booked her car to get there. And so she was in an absolute panic, and she exploded because there was no way for her to get to the airport. Well, I don't know, Meghan, grab your phone, get yourself an Uber. Like, don't be so babyish. But she was mad that somebody else hadn't done what they needed to do. However, she made her flight in time, so it all turned out okay. But in the interim, she had herself a great big baby fit. Now, Reitman's, it turned out to be the right decision for Reitman's, because they went on to increase sales by 15%. And they decided that they would indeed use Meghan for the following year. And the truth is, Meghan did have reason to feel semi-successful. I mean, the TIG wasn't like completely unknown blog, at least in her estimation. She had followers. She had followers on the TIG and on Instagram. And so as far as her social media presence, I'd say that was probably where she was doing the best. Then she had that little brush up with the UN. And of course, she wasn't going to talk about it. Hadn't gone very well. But she could at least feel like, for a moment, she had been brushing shoulders with the greatest political leaders amongst us. And then, of course, she did have her Reitman's deal. Now, the thing is that all of these little successes were painful, really, because they were so close to what she wanted to be the truth, and yet always falling below the standard she had set herself. So, I mean, it's okay that, she had a lot of followers on Instagram. It would have been better if she had 1 million, but she didn't. And it was okay that she'd been with the UN. Of course, she was no Emma Watson, and if she was honest with herself, she knew that, but she wouldn't think about that. And then Reitman's, that old lady clothing brand. Well, I just want fiddly D. I'll think about that tomorrow. I won't think about it right now that everything's just junky and not nearly what I want it to be. She worked out her frustrations at her career stall in the character of Rachel Zane. And it's interesting because I feel like some of Meghan's commentary about herself often comes through when she talks about Rachel Zane. It's like she's got this sort of third person self that she can discuss. So whenever she's talking about Rachel Zane, she's ultimately talking about herself. And she says about Rachel's just not willing to cave. She never gives up. She might be in love, but this won't put her off her end game. And I think that that's not about Rachel Zane. I think that that's about Meghan Markle. I think Meghan, at this point in the story, and it can be a little bit confusing on the timeline because I think like 2 or 3 chapters back, Tom Bower had alluded that they had broken up, but it seems like she's still with him. A very on again, off again type of thing. When she'd go to New York, she'd kind of be single Meghan, and then she'd go back and she'd be with Corey. And so at this point, she's still with Corey. And I think that what she's saying when she's talking about Rachel Zane is, and what she really means is about Meghan Markle, I might be in love with Corey, but I'm not going to be put off my ultimate goals, my ultimate ambitions. Hard graft had secured an advance in Meghan's career. This is true. This is what Tom Bower says. But the downside was that every small success was accompanied by disappointment on the bigger stage. And we go on to yet one more massive disappointment. She had, like I talked about earlier in the episode, she had a lot of anxiety about herself as an actress because though she had secured a good spot on the show, Suits isn't going to run forever. It's not a starring role in the show. And only thing people know her as an actress is that one character. She really needed other work, which is why she probably agreed to do this movie, Antisocial. The previous year, Anna Kennedy, a casting director, had invited Meghan to audition in Los Angeles for Reg Travis, who is a British director. And he was looking for a female lead in a movie called Antisocial, which is a gritty crime thriller based in London. Travis was exceedingly impressed by Meghan, and she seemed cool and charming, and he went ahead and booked her for the film. She arrived in London amid acrimony because she had demanded, and this is going to be a theme throughout the rest of the book, she had demanded for first-class transatlantic fares and luxury accommodation, but it had been rejected. I mean, they're not going to pay for that. This little movie that's trying to get up off the ground, they don't have the money and the budget to give you first-class transatlantic fare and then also luxury accommodations on the other side. Like, what are you thinking of? How could you be so self-centered? Okay. I've never flown first class. I understand it's a lovely experience. How could it not be? It looks awesome. But you're just trying to get from point A to point B. Does it really matter? You're just in a nasty, grubby bus in the sky. Just get on and get where you have to go. But no, she's got to have first class. It's always first class with her. If she can get anyone to agree to it, she will ask. And to me, it's like if it's not offered, I would be humiliated to be like, I'll do it, but where's my first class ticket? What? Can you imagine asking? And this is just Meghan's behavior throughout the entire 2 chapters we'll read today. Humiliating self-centeredness. I'm just humiliated for her, cringing at how many times she's like, I'm gonna want extra. Embarrassing. Okay, so anyway, already she'd left a bad taste in people's mouths before she'd even hit the British shores because of all of her demands prior to. And Travis complained that she was unhelpful in every way during the filming. And her co-star, this young guy, also discovered that despite their close relationship, Meghan was super high maintenance. Now, I don't know exactly what this means by despite their close relationship. In typical, I don't want to get sued Tom Bower way, and I don't blame him, he does not enlighten us on that particular phrase. But I think there's some things implied. Anyway, Greg Sulkin, the young co-star, was over it with Meghan. Now, while she was in London, of course, she met with her, bestie and agent, Gina Nelthorpe-Crown. And Nelthorpe-Crown, this is so embarrassing. Nelthorpe-Crown had made arrangements for Meghan for when she was in London to go and see, could it be Emma Watson speaking at a small private engagement, and Meghan was going to get to be in attendance. And of course, Meghan calls her hero and role model, but what she really means is, here's the person I'm most recently stalking so that I can figure out how to make my star shine brighter. This is the person I'm watching so I can match her ways and cosplay her all the livelong day. Well, she goes, all excited to see her hero and role model, Emma Watson. And at the end, she asked to meet Watson, totally thinking that they were on equal footing and that Emma would be like thrilled to meet her. But Emma was not thrilled to meet her. The actress rejected the request. Can you imagine how mortifying that snub would be? You're your hero and role model, and you come so close to meeting her. And she's been asking to meet Emma Watson for a long time now. Because when she was at the UN, she kept asking. And it kept being denied her that she should meet Emma. And now, here they were, in a very small meeting. It would have been completely feasible for Emma Watson to have met her. But probably, and I don't know this for sure, but if I were Emma Watson and I'd gotten wind that this minor celebrity was hunting for a meeting with me and seemed almost obsessed with me, I might decline also. Anyway, she declined. And in hindsight, Gina was not surprised. Watson's rebuff was not mentioned, though, when Meghan described her UN role in the TIG. And Meghan hustles on back to the hotel to get on her laptop. Click, 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 click. Dear TIG readers, she wants to tell all about how she was there supporting her good friend, Emma Watson. Emma Watson's not your friend. She didn't want to meet you. But she gets on the TIG and she says, I was in London to support Emma Watson in her He for She initiative for the UN women. And it just becomes really clear that the way Meghan dealt with setbacks was to pretend like it didn't even happen. La 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 la. You know, I'm just going to pretend that me and Emma Watson are tight. But they're not tight. Also in that same article on the TIG in which she's talking all about, me and the UN women, which she's not a part of anymore. Me and the UN women just love each other. We are just always there to support each other. And I was there to see Emma. And my mentor, Elizabeth Nyamayaro, also was somebody that I was hopeful to see at this event. What? She's not your mentor. You don't work for them anymore. And quite frankly, y'all didn't get along when you did. Okay, so Meghan does not accept rejection. She does not even believe. She always keep positive, straight ahead, plow on. Ignore. Everyone hates you, who cares? At a certain point, you have to wonder, why is it so hard for me to get my foot in the door? But I think self-reflection was not necessarily a part of her MO. All right, well, she continues to struggle to get on and to stay on this fast-moving carousel of life. She wants so desperately to get a leg up, thanks to Lori Sale's help. Remember Lori Sale, who she'd gotten work with in LA? Lori, I think, is definitely a mover and a shaker, and I can't believe how much she got for Meghan to do. Although, on the page, it all does seem a little bit depressing. It's work, but it's kind of just unimportant. And it wouldn't have felt like necessarily that great if you were Meghan. These are some of the things that Lori got for Meghan. A lunch with Cable Telecommunications in Chicago. Somebody mentioned her name in a magazine. There were some appearances at events for Air Canada, Equinox, and this project on International Girls' Day. Although the engagement with International Girls' Day, which was hosted by Dove, did pay her $40,000 to show up. And all she had to do was do a social pose and speak promotionally to Dove's delegates. $40,000 for that? So, Lori Sales was doing Meghan some favors. Those other things don't sound that exciting, but for $40,000, I'll show up at Dove. Anyway, also, she still got her little work that she does with Marcus Anderson and his Soho houses all over the globe. I don't know what Marcus Anderson's up to, and I don't understand why Meghan has to keep showing up to these Soho houses. Why is Meghan continually all over at Soho House? It just makes me wonder what's going on at Soho House, if you know what I mean. But even that was disappointing, because she might have been there, but she's over there endlessly posing for photographs with all the other guests. And then when the pictures came out of the party, was her name mentioned in the byline? Absolutely not. Was her name under the pictures? No, everybody but her. Nobody cared who Meghan Markle was. And the people who labeled the photographs didn't even know who she was. The thing is that beyond Toronto, she was just an anonymous human being. And people did not have time for her. Even that Swiss watch manufacturer who had considered possibly working with Meghan, even they could care less. And this, I mean, I literally in the margins, I have written humiliating exclamation point. Because listen to what happens when she's so eager to get some traction with them. She's ready to wrap up this watch deal. And since they're being so slow, to get their acts together, she decides to go wait in a London hotel lounge to perform yet one more pitch to this company. Can you imagine just hanging around, like hoping somebody pops out of the elevator so you can rush them with your, hey, remember me? I still want to do your watches. Oh my gosh. Now, Nelthorpe Crown was with her and says that Meghan was done up to the nines and looked stunning, but it was all for naught because her behavior was not stunning. I mean, it was stunning as in shocking, but it wasn't stunning as in, wow, we'd love to work with this person. And she wrecked it. Apparently, while they were waiting, she asked a waiter for a specialty tea. And this specific tea was served in a German-style mug. And Meghan looked at the tankard, familiar in a beer festival, and exclaimed, I can't have this. This is just not on brand. Take it back. What? What? The waiter returned with a china cup and saucer. And of course, the meeting ended without a contract. Well, who would want to work with this girl? She can't drink her tea out of a mug? It's not on brand. Sister girl, I can promise you that no one is sitting there and looking at you from across the room and being like, I thought I liked Meghan, but then I saw her drink out of that German tankard and now I'm not so sure. Tea out of a mug? God forbid it. Weeks later, she returned to London to watch a rough cut of Antisocial. And listen to what her friend says. Now, okay, I know we all need a friend to help us see the light when we don't know, but her friend didn't even try to couch the blow. It's awful, a friend told her at the end of the private viewing. I mean, it's really bad, and it's embarrassing for you. Can you imagine if after the movie's over, your friend turns to you and goes, that's awful and it's embarrassing for you? But Meghan agreed. I mean, she couldn't think otherwise. And it was horrible because this was only her 13th brief appearance. And she wanted to forget that it had ever happened. She refused to give up, though. She said, I've never wanted to be a lady who lunches. I want to work. And earning money was her priority. And so, okay, fine. That didn't work out. Charging on. Move forward. Now, at the same time, she had her dad snapping at her heels because he wanted money. Now, he had funded every single minute of her lifestyle up until this point. But Thomas Markle now was having money troubles of his own. Could it be because he's still trying to pay back for that Northwestern education she did nothing with? It would appear that way. Now, Meghan had thrown him a couple of pennies and dimes from now, when she couldn't say no any longer. And ever since he'd funded that wedding and taken out all that money from the stock market, he'd really, borne the price of that decision. He shouldn't have done that. She didn't need that money. And I guess he just wanted to save face and be the dad who pays for the wedding. But she was in a financial position to pay for her own wedding, and he should have let her do it. But he didn't, and now he's suffering for it. So he's been short of money, and Meghan has, like I said, thrown him a couple of dimes when it was convenient for her. And she'd helped him to finance part of a car. So she didn't even buy him a car. But she helped him to finance part of it. He could get a loan for the other part. And then she helped him move house. I don't know exactly what the help was in moving. Tom Bauer just says, and Meghan helped him move home. So, move home, but move home to where? Maybe back to LA, because he'd been living in Mexico, but I don't think so, because I know he was still in Mexico when she and Harry got together. So I'm not sure what that phrase means. But anyway, she'd helped him with some housing expenses, I believe, and then she gave him a couple of bucks to add to the loan he had for a new car. And that's all Meghan could find to do. And when Thomas Markle reached out to her about maybe helping him, she called him, and he called her in Toronto, and he must have been pretty hard up because I think that he really was proud of the fact that he'd been able to give Meghan whatever she wanted her whole life. And so for him now to have to ask her for money was probably a little bit humiliating, but he did need the help. And so when he called her in Toronto and asked if she could maybe send him some money, she said, I've checked with Andrew, who is my business manager, and according to him, I've given you $20,000 over the last 2 years, so that's going to be a hard no for me. and I need you to sort of just stop asking. Okay, because I've already helped. And Markle was really shocked that she was keeping such a close tab on the money. He said that she knew down to the last dime how much she'd given him. And really, quite frankly, when you compared it to the 500,000 pounds he'd spent on her education, it seemed like $20,000 was spit in the bucket. So he felt like, now that she was making money, maybe she could help him. What an old-fashioned idea to help your parents. Now, and I just love this. I mean, this is just such a clear Meghanism. After they get done arguing about money, she says to him, I don't know why you're always down there in LA anyway. You never even come to visit me. Why don't you come up to Toronto and actually spend some time with me instead of always asking me for money? And of course he can't say yes to that. He doesn't have any money. That's the whole point. He can't even afford to fly to Toronto, but she's not offering a ticket, least of all a first class ticket. You can imagine that if she did pay for him to go, he'd be lucky if he was find a seat in the baggage. But anyway, isn't that so classic of her? That she would ask him to do something that she knows he can't do, and then she can act hurt that he didn't ever come visit her. My daddy never came to Toronto to see me. Well, your daddy is poor, and he's having money troubles. And you couldn't fund for him to come visit you if you cared that much. Okay, well, their relationship is cooling, not surprisingly. And so she takes that opportunity just to decide she's not even going to bother to come down for Christmas of 2015. Why should she? Her dad's the worst. He's probably going to ask her for a Christmas present or something. And so she spends that with Corey's family. They're still together, lo and behold. Who can believe it? It seems like Corey really lacks quite frankly, he lacks the balls to break up with her. He's very unhappy. He's not at all into who Meghan is becoming. Over the course of their relationship, she's become so self-involved that he can barely stand it. And also, the fact that she just she just refuses to let the world know she's with him. It's offensive to him, as it would to any of us, I think. I would be offended. And here's the thing. In his own right, he was known as a bit of a celebrity chef in Toronto. It's not like he was flipping hamburgers down at the local Johnny Rockets. I mean, he truly was somebody that had made a name for himself, and any of Meghan's connections in Toronto were thanks to his goodwill. So for her to constantly act like, oh, I'm not going to mention that I'm with him, as though like perhaps it would have, I don't want to, I don't know what excuse she had for why she didn't speak about him on her website, or why she never let anybody know that she was with him. But she didn't. She went out of her way to make sure that people didn't know she was with him, and she also went out of her way almost to disparage him if it could have ever come up that she was connected to him. First of all, though Meghan's soon-to-be or potential in-laws loved her, Corey's mom thought she was the best. Said that Meghan was very smart, very bright, very caring, and very sincere. Corey was experiencing a different Meghan at home. Every time that she would come back from her trips to New York, she would be just absolutely insufferable. She'd be name-dropping. She'd be talking about all the things that she had done. Anytime that Corey took her to a restaurant, she would immediately request that she get a special table because she's famous, and she just can't mingle with the unwashed masses. And Corey, in his frustration, snapped at her, "You're not Nicole Kidman, okay? You're not. So why don't you just chill out for a hot second with all of this me business, okay? We have a life here in Toronto. If you care to join, I'm here. And if you want to stop talking about yourself for just like 1 second, that would be awesome." But no, she kept on. And again, like I mentioned before, there was a real apparent unwillingness to allow any publicity about their relationship to hit any media. And certainly not on her own website would she ever mention that she knew Corey. Which is odd, though, because her whole website is about food. So why, and I mean, that's one of the many things she discusses, but it's food, fashion, and beauty. Okay, well, you're married to a chef. Seems like there would have been so much content she could have done surrounding her relationship with him and the different restaurants they went to. That would have been a fun element for her to have. It would have made her seem way less self-involved if she had been including the guy that she was in a relationship with. I would have thought that would have really helped to expand her brand. But no, because that doesn't help. If the world knows she's with somebody, how is she going to swindle all these guys into giving her freebies? They're not going to really want to touch it because what if they have to, deal with Corey? So, of course she doesn't want to tell the world that she's with him. But then she's got this whole underhanded way of kind of kicking him under the bus, too. Because one time she had been asked in a magazine to name the 5 people that she would invite to a dinner party. And then she goes on to name all these celebrity American chefs. but not even her own boyfriend, who she's been with for years now, does she say that she'd want him at the table. She says that she'd like Anthony Bourdain and Mario Batali and Gwyneth Paltrow and Jamie Oliver, and then a friend of hers to be there. Like, just, like a girlfriend to come hang out. Not the boyfriend, not him. What would he have to talk to Jamie Oliver and Anthony Bourdain about? And then, to top it all off, to add insult to injury, she even appeared as a celebrity guest on the Food Network's TV show Chopped Jr. as an expert, praising the, quote, real sort of farm fresh to table food that reminded her of what she'd been eating growing up in California. What does she think Corey's doing at his restaurant? Digging around in the dumpster out back and dragging in whatever he finds, slapping it on the grill and serving it up as some kind of an experience? Really? I mean, the thing is, she wouldn't have even had that spot on Chopped Jr. of all things. Who watches that? There's nothing worse than those kids that get up and try to talk like grown-ups. So, I mean, she wasn't even on Real Chopped. She was on Chopped Jr. But Corey is the one who secured her even that. And she didn't even have the decency to act grateful. And the entire appearance just had this sort of, I guess, unthankful tint to it, Apparently, how she said on the TIG, kindness, that's a non-negotiable for me, did not extend to how she treated Corey. So Bauer finishes that chapter by saying that although Corey was unhappy, he seemed incapable of ending the relationship. In private, Meghan could not conceal her own impatience that things would finally get on and that they could finally break up. We got to get on to Rwanda. This is just shocking. I have no words. I'm literally speechless. I'll find some though. Meghan Markle took a second trip to Rwanda in January 2016, and it was very different from her first trip. Not only because her attitude was different to those that she was working with, in that she was not openly rude and hostile, but now that she didn't have the UN women that she had to sort of impress and be sort of a sterile representation of women's equality, now she could be feminine, not a feminist, and she could take the entire time to turn this village's joy of getting new water into a fashion shoot for herself. Can you even imagine the self-centeredness that would require? Never in anybody's wildest imaginations, no normal functioning human adult would think, hey, I'm going to go to this random village in Rwanda where we're celebrating the joy that they're finally getting clean water and that the children of the village don't have to spend their entire day walking to get water and their entire day walking back, and they can't even have an education. No, I'm not going to spend time celebrating that. I'll like dance under the water with them for like a hot second, but then I've got like a ton of outfits that I want to wear, and I'll like hang out with the kids in this backdrop of African awesomeness, and have my photo shoot. That's what it was for her. And it's humiliating. This whole chapter is super duper duper embarrassing for her. Okay, so against all odds, she has somehow managed to get Matt Hassel to fall under her spell. Now, if you don't remember this guy, I don't blame you. There's like 1,000 names in this book. But Matt Hassel is the guy who had originally been brought in by the UN to work on that promotional video for when Meghan was coming right onto the UN. And remember, he didn't know who she was. They had said that she was this famous celebrity. And then when they introduced her, he was kind of like disappointed because he had never heard of her. But I guess he's gotten over his disappointment, because even though she was difficult to work with on that one video, somehow she has ingratiated herself, and he now is not only wanting to work with her, but some say he was even besotted by her. And there's this Christian organization called World Vision, and they had been looking for somebody to work with who could maybe give them a little exposure, maybe a little celebrity. And Matt Hassel's like, I got just the woman for you. Her name is Meghan Markle. So he brings her on to help them promote their work in Rwanda. And World Vision, their big thing is to go to different villages and drill wells so that that village can finally have clean water, so that everybody's entire life is not swept up in trying to spend all day to get water down in this dirty creek and then like making themselves and their children sick. It's like the saddest thing. I mean, and so anyway, World Vision is like, let's get water to this village, and then the children can actually go to school, and then, maybe they can progress their odds in the world, you know? Anyway, so Meghan agrees to do it after talking to Laura DeWar. Laura DeWar was World Vision's chief marketing officer and a Suits fan, as it would turn out. Now, a word about Laura. Disappointing and short-sighted. She has completely become obsessed with working with a celebrity. And I don't know if it's just because, all right, little word here. Meghan hasn't said that she's like a Christian or anything. She just happens to be the face. But sometimes I feel like, and as a Christian myself, I feel like I can be honest about this. Sometimes I feel like Christians get a little too excited when a celebrity brushes up against any kind of organization, or like when a celebrity comes out and says that they're a Christian, the entire Christian culture gets all excited. Oh good, a celebrity, somebody else agrees with us, somebody in the mainstream, we're not just a bunch of outliers over here. I mean, remember when Kanye was coming out with his Sunday service and that album, the Blue album? I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I listened to it. But then he goes off, like, you know, fall off the cliff, you know, and this happens all the time. Anyway, I feel like Laura DeWar was having Christian celebrity obsession. Like when Christians are just way too excited about meeting celebrities. Y'all, those are people too. Who cares? Did God create them holier than you? No. But anyway, she's totally gonna give Meghan pass after pass after pass on her behavior on this trip. And even gaslight anybody who wants to talk about, wasn't it weird that Meghan wanted it to be like a photo shoot? No. Meghan is so sincere. Meghan just loved those kids so much. Yet none of her behavior would have shown that Meghan cared that much. Okay, anyway, that's just my little aside there. But I just wish that she had been a better representation of how to behave when you're around somebody who's famous. Because this isn't, Jesus Christ didn't come up. You know, he's not the one promoting World Vision. You don't have to defend everything. Though Laura DeWar may have had the wool pulled over her squinting eyes, Brenda Serminsky, who worked with Matt Haskell at KBS and was the producer for this video, called Meghan to see, you know, hey, when can we arrange for you to go? When would this work out for you? And they had agreed within 30 minutes when she would go to Rwanda to promote World Vision's project of building the wells in destitute villages. And Serminsky said that she would produce the film of the visit. But difficulties were just around the corner. Because as they tried to plan the trip, and after they signed the contract, Meghan showed who she really was. The actress insisted on flying to Rwanda first class. This is getting boring. And to be accompanied by Gabar Jurina, who is a Canadian fashion photographer, and Michael Goyette, an American hair and makeup stylist who was also listed as traveling with Gabor. And Meghan said that she needed Michael to come because only Michael, these are her words, knows how to work with my black hair. She had naturally curly hair, obviously. We know this from her pictures of her youth. And she used a treatment called keratin to create her hair's silky straight look. So Meghan would not go on this trip unless her photographer and her stylist could come. Now, let me just pause real quick right here. Do y'all remember back when we were reading Spare together and when Harry took her on the second date, or maybe it was the third date, to Africa? And he spent this long time talking about how down to earth she was when she got to Africa, and that he was afraid she'd have duvets, fluffy duvets and blow dryers and makeup in her bag. But then when she opened her bag, she just had the essentials, some snacks and a yoga mat and a couple of pairs of shorts. Remember this? Now, I had thought the entire time reading Spare, oh, this kind of seems like a woman's writing it. Now, after reading this and reading so many samples of the TIG, Meghan 100% wrote Spare. It's not even a did she, maybe, could have. No, she did. And the fact that she'd spend so much time talking about what she didn't bring to Africa is an answer to the fact of what she did bring to Africa on this trip to Rwanda. You know, because it had gotten out that she had been real high maintenance and an absolute diva. Not necessarily that she was being so rude to the people who were helping her out, but the fact that she would need to bring all these things, that's what seems so diva. But I don't think, I remember thinking when I read Spare, that's weird that he would talk about, are there fluffy duvets in her bag? Because it didn't seem to me that a guy would even suppose that you would bring a blanket like of that quality. You know what I'm saying? Like, a guy wouldn't think, oh, he might think, did she bring a lot of makeup? Because guys know about that. But do guys really pay that much attention to bedding? And for her, like, on the take, she's always talking about the duvets. So just more confirmation to me that she wrote spare. Anyway, on this trip, she certainly brought all that she could and then some. And because of her demands, Sierminski, who was the film's producer, they couldn't afford to bring her on the trip because all of Meghan's friends needed to come. So Sierminski got left behind. Now, there they are in Rwanda, and in 2 air-conditioned minivans, Meghan and her team of 3 World Vision marketing executives, a Canadian cameraman, plus an advertising account executive, and several suitcases containing a selection of fashion outfits, were driven for 90 minutes from Kilgalley's best 5-star hotel to Gashora. For generations, the village women and children had walked every day several miles to fill their jerry cans in a dirty river. The result was constant illness. The commissioning of a well financed by World Vision to deliver fresh water was a major event, marked by Meghan's arrival in January 2016. So here it is, a huge day for them. But Meghan's got to come and make it about herself. The cruelty of that is what shocks me as well. Couldn't she have just come and celebrated with them instead of having to make it about her? The massive selfishness and the self-righteousness of thinking that she had the right to do it. That's the other thing that surprises me. Okay, so to the villagers' surprise, after Meghan was filmed with the children playing under the clean water bursting from the tap, she disappeared with Gabar Jarina, her photographer. For hours, she was photographed, the perfectly groomed actress, hugging and squeezing and smiling with the village children. Each pose was followed by a clothing change. Can you imagine? I mean, it's bad enough that she's there with her photographer and her stylist and even one outfit, but that she would change over and over and over again. Several suitcases of clothes were brought to this event so that she could keep changing. That's not about you. It's about this village that can finally look to tomorrow without having to worry that everyone in the family is going to get dysentery. Meghan is a true humanitarian. Despite all this, though, Laura DeWar wants to let you know that Meghan was a true humanitarian. Speaking of Meghan's authenticity, DeWar praised her involvement with the children, letting them sit on her lap for the photographer. Isn't that generous of her to let those dirty children come near her? Laura DeWar, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. Why? Why are you so blinded by the dim light of Meghan's star that you would praise her for letting the children sit on her lap? Everybody lets the children sit on their lap. What kind of a cruel monster would you be if you came there and the children are all excited and you whisked them away? Get away from me. She couldn't have done that. All right, so once she returned to the village, Meghan was filmed admiring children painting images of their lives on paper supplied by the charity. The Watercolor project, which was conceived by Matt Hassel, by the way, do not forget this point. This was his idea, because now there was water enough that you could actually use it to paint, right? Matt Hassel's staff and Matt Hassel had come up with the Watercolor project as a way to illustrate the value of the charity's work to supply clean water. Yet Laura DeWar, in her inability to see that Meghan is just a human being like she, wants everybody to know that Meghan came up with this idea. She was the creator of the project. Look at the way Laura is trying to ingratiate herself with Meghan. What's Laura's deal? Why does she care so much if Meghan gets credit for this? It wasn't Meghan's idea. Throughout the 4-day trip, Meghan was impeccably considerate to the accompanying team because she wanted to be sure that this wasn't round 2 of the UN. But back in Toronto, Meghan continued on with this philanthropic look, and she hosted a party to raise funds for another well. Well, good. I mean, at least there's something coming of this. Well done. She wanted everybody to come down to a gallery downtown and see the children's paintings. And she explained to the guests that this new well would allow more village children to go to school because they wouldn't have to spend their entire day carrying water. Great initiative. I'm glad she's finally doing something. This is wonderful. This water is not just a source for the community, Meghan said in the video's commentary, but it can really be a source for creative imagination and dreaming and hoping for something even greater than they can even imagine. you'll feel really good at the end of the day knowing that you've been part of that. I feel like that's a little bit bland and inarticulate, but yes, you would feel good if you helped out with this. Now, though Laura DeWar might have been blinded, old Serminsky, who'd been left behind because Meghan needed somebody to comb her hair, did not give Meghan all the due she felt was required. Meghan's efforts had raised $15,000 to build another well, which, can you imagine going to see these children's paintings and hearing the story that they had lived lives that from the dawn till dark, they'd been spent carrying water, dirty water back and forth? Can you imagine anybody going and hearing that story and not offering some money? I mean, the story writes itself. Meghan could have been as bland as possible and she still would have raised that $15,000. But anyway, at the end of all of this box ticking of Meghan's philanthropist check, Serminsky was just puzzled over the whole thing. How did this even happen? How did we let this person get involved with this? Why are we letting this person's name be on any of this? Celebrities using a desolate African village as the backdrop for a fashion shoot was mind-blowing. Yet Meghan, she concluded, had opportunistically orchestrated the trip to pose as a philanthropist. That anybody could be so self-involved shocked Serminsky. And her ambitions were so obvious. Serminsky said that she was on a path with visions of something good happening at the end, but her destination was unknown, and whoever she had to use in the process to that, quote, something good, who cares? Who does she need to trample? What little African child does she need to hug? What picture does she need to take dancing under some water pipes? Whatever. So long as people will think that she's a philanthropist. So long as she can get ahead of Emma Watson. The Rwandan trip coincided with the end of the 5th season of Suits. And as we've said before, and I started this episode out talking about it, every time a season would end, Meghan would start to feel the panic rising. What if she's written out of the next season? What if she doesn't have as big a part? And even though her fee was being increased every season, you know, she was now at $175,000 an episode. The other stars were being paid $500,000 an episode, although they were the stars, not, you know, part of the cast. But again, once her contract ended, her acting career would need to be relaunched because, you know, when you've been a person in a series for so long, you have to take a little bit of a hiatus from the acting world and then reintroduce yourself. So, I mean, there's been a few exceptions. George Clooney didn't have to, and Jennifer Aniston didn't have to. But you look at the rest of the cast of Friends, they struggled to get back on their feet. And so Meghan knew she would struggle as well. And what was she going to do in the interim? Well, she was waiting for everybody to forget that she'd been Rachel Zane. As if anybody even needed to remember she had been Rachel Zane. But anyway, she had to reassess her life. She had to figure out what to do because, again, Suits would dry up eventually. She decided that she needed to hustle on back to New York. John Fitzpatrick would help her. He'd always helped her before. It's like her fairy godfather. And so she goes down to Larry King's show and she gives this pre-prepared performance and it's all the familiars. Once when I was a kid, I wrote to Procter & Gamble and changed the world for feminism. And also President Kagame is the best. And don't forget that women should be taken seriously. She had all the famous Tig messages in this second Larry King interview. And everything she says, and Tom Bauer is so right, he said everything she always said was so predictable. None of it was new, true, and interesting. It's all these like little coffee mug slogans, you know, be kind to yourself. Talk to yourself like you're your own best friend. You know what, I do talk to myself as though I'm my own best friend. And sometimes you need a best friend that's going to tell you to get up off your lazy ass and get to work. Anyway, she, you know, champion yourself. But then what's weird is that she wants to, you know, she says all these things, but then she wants to throw in a dose of vulnerability because that's what she knows that the Tig readers love. They love this faux vulnerability that she loves to bring. She says that at this time in her life, you know, she doesn't have a mentor. She needs a lot of help and she doesn't have a sounding box. But I thought you said, not but 2 seconds ago, that you and Elizabeth Yamayaro were the best, so tight, and that she was your mentor. So what happened to that lady from the UN? Oh, that's right. You just finally decided to tell us the truth about the fact that you're not involved with them anymore. Okay, well, John Fitzpatrick, he doesn't want her to be left alone in the dark. So he says that he will, you know, drag her around the city per the usual. But here's the thing. John might know a lot of people, but his little, you know, 3-star second-rate hotel wasn't the place she wanted to be seen in. But, you know, she had to know who buttered her bread. And she had to make an exception because Fitzpatrick had become her passport into the heart of American politics. So she had to swallow her pride stay in his junky hotel. Fitzpatrick at this time was hosting another fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. And she had been invited. And she couldn't wait to arrive because there were going to be some big names there. Not only Bill Clinton, but also Liam Neeson. So she was stoked to go to this party. And not only that, but Fitzpatrick wanted Meghan to be in a photo where she was standing between Liam Neeson and John himself. But unfortunately, the lighting of the photo was real bad. And she did not look very attractive. And that was really disappointing for her because she'd been wanting to use that photo on the TIG. But then after she saw it, she's like, oh, no, I don't think so. And then also Liam Neeson had the gall not even to remember he'd ever met her. That was the other thing that offended her because they had a photo showing that they'd met. But he didn't even remember. Hanging out among the famous in Clinton's world was an incentive though. And it just felt like a place where possibility was around every corner. You know, just struggle a little harder. Just struggle a little harder. Strive, strive, strive. That's the name of the game. Eventually, doors will open. Now, one door did open. Nelthorpe Crown, her faithful, faithful agent who continues to work at the hardest gig ever known to man, has managed to get Meghan a speaking engagement in the Cayman Islands. This is, again, another so embarrassing situation. Now, Nelthorpe Crown had arranged for her to address a financial company's annual conference. Why in the world would a financial company at their conference want Meghan Markle? What does she have to say to them? Fixing the gig had been a hard sell. Meghan's main selling point was her low cost. As an unknown, her fee was only $15,000 plus expenses and a business class air ticket. Now, she wasn't wanting to fly any business? Oh no, first class only. But they weren't going to pay for that. So that had been rejected. And the thing too is, Nelthorpe Crown, remember, this was the person who tried to tell us Meghan was a woman of substance, a fluent woman of substance. So of course she was all ready to lie to this group and say that Meghan's performance was going to be really good. But the thing is, Meghan could only make the same speech about women's rights that she delivered to the UN in 2014 and every occasion since then. She had no new material. So I don't know what Gina thought that Meghan was going to talk about. But to add insult to injury, Meghan insisted that Nelthorpe Crown arrange for Jessica Milrooney to be invited on this trip. And that Jessica's expenses needed to be paid as well. What? Like, who could request this? If somebody was going to send me somewhere, I wouldn't be like, oh, and also I need my sister to come too, because we're besties. What's your sister got to do with it? I'm not hiring her. And what's Jessica Milrooney got to do with it? She's not being hired. She's not giving a talk. Why should they fund that? And Meghan said, she's my best friend. Like, that made sense. But then she tried to figure, you know, and then she said, I also need her as my beautician and stylist. Well, what happened to that joker that she had to bring to Rwanda with her who helped her with her black hair? What's Meghan Milrooney know about black hair? All right, well, more importantly, and Meghan, this is the truth of it, Meghan needed Milrooney to provide a confidant's reassurance because Meghan was having a lot of personal crisis, to be honest. Things weren't really happening on any front. And what was happening was marginal at best. And she wanted to talk to Milrooney the whole time about what should she really do about acting. Should she really continue to try to give it a go? The thing, too, is she was only getting older as well, and she did want children. I mean, the clock was ticking, and she felt it. But she didn't want kids with Corey. God forbid it. No, this guy with his limited ambitions in a country that was completely and totally unglamorous, his horizons were too limited. And, you know, Tom Bauer interviewed a friend who essentially said about Corey, he was boring. He was boring to her. There was only so many times you could discuss a recipe. And after they would talk about food, there really just was nothing else between them. And then too, Meghan was never using him as any kind of content for her website. So he had just she'd run the course with him. Even though it was his social importance that had gotten her anywhere in Toronto, again, she'd squeezed every bit out of him that she could. It's just the same song and dance as it had been with Trevor. She wanted real celebrity, many millions of dollars in personal glory, and this Corey wasn't going to bring it. He was over it as well because, again, like we stated in the last chapter, every time she went to New York, she'd just come back a completely, totally self-consumed, self-important nightmare. Her ego, he said, was out of control. And so both of them were just over it with each other. He was sick of her. She was sick of him. Neither one of them. She didn't want to break up with him because she hadn't decided what she wanted to do next. And he just didn't have the strength to do it. So they were at a real impasse. Now, don't think that while she was with Corey, she wasn't still looking for a new boyfriend. She was. She wasn't going to break up with him until she had a sure thing going with somebody else. She had swapped some messages with Matt Cardle, who is, I guess, on that show, The X Factor. But they kept trying to meet, but they didn't get a chance to meet. And then he ended up meeting somebody else who ended up being his wife. But in the interim between meeting Meghan and trying to actually physically meet her. So that came to naught. And she tried approaching other single celebrities when she lived with Corey, but nothing, she couldn't get anything off the ground with them. And professionally, she was just in the same spot she'd been in before. Nothing new was coming. Professionally, she remained on the same spot on the treadmill. World Vision had reappointed her as a global ambassador. What? Laura DeWar, I just can't get over her. And she had another season of Reitman's clothing that she could look forward to. They now had a clothing collection in her name. So she could look forward to that, I guess. Her social media was doing okay. So it was all staying the same. It was just like the second seasons of the things she'd always been doing. But she wanted to be a success at home. That's what she kept saying, at home. But the thing is, her home is Hollywood. So what she means is she wants to be a success in Hollywood. But Nelthorpe Crown said, well, what you need to do is come to London. You know, we can make you a success here. And then when you go over there, it just won't be so hard to break in. You won't be such an unknown. And Nelthorpe Crown said that she would introduce Meghan to Matthew Freud, who his agency could create some kind of brand for her in England. Now, Nelthorpe Crown didn't say it out loud. She doubted that Freud would want to have anything to do with Meghan, but she was willing to not tell Meghan that just yet. Just dangle the carrot so Meghan would come, and then maybe they could work together and get something off the ground. Now, the word brand triggered Meghan's interest. Okay, she agreed. But I don't want to stay long. I want to go back to Los Angeles. I want to be success in Los Angeles, my home. So she was willing to go, but really only because she wanted to break up with Corey, finally just get it over with. So she's going to move to London. It's just the same song and dance as what had happened with Trevor. Nothing new here. Make a big move and then break up with the guy that you were with before. At the same time, Meghan's still filming Suits, and Meghan's whole tone on the show and with her co-stars who had originally really liked her, remember way back when she got married to Trevor, they all thought she was great, but now she's just become, you know, too cool for school, and she doesn't want to be there, and she's just too big a star really to be doing and playing Rachel Zane, and she's just over the whole thing. And they said that her tone had become sharper and aggressive. I mean, apart from the TIG, apart from the other things we've mentioned, Meghan wasn't known anywhere. There had been this one book called The Game that had been published in Australia. It was a coffee table book, and it contained 40 trailblazing women, and it had included Meghan in the book. Now, there's so many trailblazing women, and you only chose 40, and one of them was Meghan. I can only imagine the people who made that book. Well, what was their limited resources? I don't know. But in that article, in that coffee table book, you know, she had designed herself as this poor girl who had risen up out of the ashes, you know, despite the fact that she was just this biracial girl with, you know, limited opportunities. She had seized the bull by the horns and had come out swinging. This is how she wrote about herself in The Game. And this is where she began first to put on that whole persona of having to work day in and day out for everything that she got. You know, she'd been over there earning $4 an hour at Humphrey Yogurt, and she had, you know, clung to the words of her theology teacher from school who told her that she needed to continue to give and help and do, and that this act of grace would be the thing that would help her and propel her forward in life, and that she'd found that when you give a little, you get a lot. You know, just a lot of absurdities and platitudes and foolishness. And, you know, I just love people so much, and all I want to do is help people. And, you know, and I was just so poor growing up, and the only thing, I couldn't give a lot of money, but I could give time, and I did that. You know, just this really nauseating sketch of her youth. And she really used this impoverished youth story to become part of the Clintons and the Democrats set. You know, and they love that story of somebody who rose up from the ashes, you know, got an education and became something. That's their favorite. So as acting is becoming less and less of a possibility for her, she becomes more and more dependent on the Democrats and what they can give her. And one night in April, she flew to New York for another of John Fitzpatrick's eve of primary celebrations at his hotel. There's 200 supporters there cheering on the Clintons. And of course, Meghan supported Hillary Clinton at that time. And she went on the nightly show and she did, you know, the song and dance everybody on the nightly show was doing at the same time. She comes out and she condemns Donald Trump for being divisive and misogynistic, a vote loser among women for the kind of world that he's painting. She said that Trump had made it easy to see, you know, you really don't want that. You don't want that kind of a person in charge. And Hillary Clinton was really the only option if you were a thinker. I mean, I think the thing that shocks me too is she's saying the same thing all celebrities say. You rarely see a celebrity that has their own opinion about politics or is brave enough to say it if they do. And I'm not saying she had to come out and say, oh, I love Donald Trump, you know, but I'm just saying she never, anytime she's a platform, she's saying the same things everybody else says. So I'm sure she was confused why she couldn't get an in why, you know, she was doing the same thing everybody else was doing. She was saying the same things. She was mirroring herself off of people who were successful. So why was she not able to be successful? I can imagine she was very frustrated. But I think it's because there wasn't any facet of her personality that really stood out. So she could have afforded to say the same simple platitudes and, you know, shallow sentiments that everybody else has if there had been something about her that wasn't shallow. But the problem is there just didn't seem to be. Meghan had just reached a real turning point. And after spending a few days with Corey in New York, she was certain that their relationship was over. And it was just time for them to move on. They needed to figure out what they were doing with their rented house. She was not relishing the gossip mills of Toronto and what they'd all say once they found out she wasn't with him anymore. But she just had to get up and get out of there. And in addition, her frustrating failure to find an exciting career follow-up to Suits and her weariness of life in Canada all coalesced during 2 days in Montreal in the spring of 2016. So next time we read, we'll find out what happened on those 2 days in 2016. I'm excited to find out. Now, weren't those some crazy chapters? All right, y'all. I wish I had something meaningful and lovely to say at the end of this, but I actually have to go because we're moving in 2 months. We're moving out of state. And because of that, we're trying to put our house on the market, and they're coming to take pictures of our house. And so I've got to get my act together and make sure everything is the way it should be. And I gotta go make my kids breakfast, and I got so many things I gotta do, and I got papers to grade and all kinds of stuff. So I don't have anything meaningful to say except for the fact that let this book be a life lesson of how we don't want to be. And, you know, let's also, when we see people acting like frauds, let's not give them a platform. I was just sickened by Laura DeWar. Why was she such a sycophant? I don't understand that, you know? Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess this is the thing, the way I feel about Laura. There are so many things in life that are bewitching and exciting and all of this. But when you've met Jesus Christ, when you know better, why would you be bewitched by celebrity? If the God of the universe who sent his son, and you get to have a relationship with that God, why would you ever need to have anybody else's approval? Why would you ever need to ingratiate yourself with anybody else? Why would you ever need to lie in order to get that person's approval of you? Is Jesus Christ's approval of you not enough? And I wouldn't judge anybody else by that standard, except that she was part of a Christian organization. So I would assume she espouses the same things that any Christian would believe. And if you believe that, why do you need other people's approval of you? There's nothing that anybody else can say. There's nothing that anybody else can do to improve on the fact that you have been saved by the Son of God. So to bend over backwards to please somebody who is clearly acting in a way that is offensive to the villagers in that little Rwandan African village, why would you bend over backwards to please that person? You're there to serve the needs of this poor community and to celebrate them. And to take away the joy in their moment, to give more attention to this rich American celebrity is a shame. And it's embarrassing. In this entire chapter, even for all of Meghan's foolishness, I was far more annoyed by what I saw from Laura than what I saw from Meghan, because Meghan doesn't know better, but Laura should have. All right, I'll see you guys later this week. Bye.